Half-Life is, without a doubt, one of the most important games to me, and to like a kabillion other people too. If you're a Valve fan and you don't like Half-Life, man, why even waste your time being oh, right. If you don't know already, Black Mesa is a full remake and reimagining of Half-Life in the Source engine. Now you might be thinking about Half-Life Source, which is Half-Life in the Source engine, or you might be thinking, wait, I thought Half-Life was always in the Source engine. Have I said Source engine enough? What if you don't even know what the Source engine is? Okay, Source is the engine made by Valve that they used for pretty much every game between and including Half-Life 2 and CSGO. You can call this an exception. It's built on a more powerful version of their older engine, Gold Source, which was a modified version of Quake, which means it's 3D, but it doesn't use as many sprites as old games like Doom. If you don't know what a sprite is, you can leave. This is the advanced class. Anyways, Half-Life is on Gold Source, the old one, and Half-Life Source is on, Source. And these games have very few differences, both produced by Valve. Now, Black Mesa is a fan-made project created on a version of the Source engine that's modified to work like Half-Life 2 for the most part. The key differences are better graphics, a physics engine, different gunplay and movement, ragdolls, props, and this is just on the engine side. Black Mesa is practically built from scratch. This means redoing all the textures, redoing the voice lines, redesigning the guns both visually and mechanically, rebuilding the levels you need to do as best as you can to match the scale, include every piece of every puzzle. If you can die in a spot in Half-Life, you need to die in that spot in Black Mesa too. So I can understand why there are plenty of minute little differences in Black Mesa's design, and in case you haven't caught on just now, Black Mesa is a little bit different from Half-Life in some places. Personally, I don't think you've ever really experienced a game if you haven't done it in an intended state. I've played through Mario 64 on an emulator with a USB N64 controller, but I didn't feel like I'd really played it until I beat it on the Switch. I don't want updated graphics, I don't want half-assed keyboard controls. I'll always pick homebrew over emulation if it's possible. Obviously, every version of a game is released with someone intending for you to play it the way that you do, because how else would it even exist? But it's ridiculous not to draw the line somewhere. So we have to do the dirty work. We have to play these games and decide amongst ourselves if these games count, if they match the developer's original intentions. I'll say right now, Black Mesa gets really fucking close. So much effort and attention went into perfecting all the pieces, and it absolutely stands out if you're familiar enough with Half-Life 2. It's completely different, and it's very close to Half-Life, but I've had a lot of trouble trying to decide one way or the other on whether or not this really is experiencing Half-Life, if the player gets all that Valve was trying to give in the original game. And in some places, the answer is just no. The first one is the very first fight in the game. If you've ever played Half-Life, try to think of the first time in the game you fight anything. Are you thinking of waiting for a fucking security guard to shoot a zombie with sloppy AI, or are you thinking of wailing on a zombie with a crowbar? I already know the answer to that question, but in Black Mesa, they picked the other one. No longer do you find the crowbar in front of breakable glass, such a genius way of introducing the weapon as its first and most interesting capability to something you just know by intuition. Instead, you have to get the security guard to come fight the zombies for you, and you get the crowbar laying around in some office with head crabs jumping around it. I'm pretty sure the glass and stuff around it isn't breakable. I don't know. I remember the original Half-Life one so much better because it is so much better. This feels like such an unnecessary change. A similar type of difference is physics puzzles and interactions. There's not a lot. They don't really count for much, and you might even wonder why they're there at all. And I kinda wanted the same thing. It's something that Half-Life 2 is special for, and I think it's something to keep in Half-Life 2. Remember earlier when I said they have to match the scale when rebuilding the maps? Well, they do to some degree, but they didn't really get it exactly right. It feels much more open, which not only affects combat by limiting cover, something we'll get to later, but it affects the atmosphere as well. Half-Life is supposed to feel very claustrophobic. You're trapped in the tight corridors of a science lab. And though there are times where Black Mesa gets it right, there's plenty of times where it doesn't. I think overall some of the earlier map design of this project didn't have a full understanding of why Valve built some of the places the way that they did. And this lack of understanding can also bleed into the combat. Like I mentioned before, it's really much more difficult to not take damage in this game. Soldiers have perfect aim, all the enemies are just as beefy as they were before, and now can be at longer distances, hitting you more accurately. And you end up in a lot of situations that you wouldn't ever have in Half-Life. I don't want to make it sound like it's harder, it's not. The gunplay is much more reliable, and the strategic elements of the arsenal are all there. You can get through every fight with the same amount of effort as you would need in Half-Life. It's just different. I didn't wind up playing this in the same balls-to-the-walls fashion that I did in the original, and sometimes I really missed it. Now, Zen? I'm not even gonna get into Zen, okay? It sucks in both games, it sucks for different reasons in this one, but whatever. Zen in Half-Life is not what Valve intended it to be, so I can definitely get behind leaving that up for interpretation. However, I would have been much more convinced if you made it good. No further comments. I've seen the visual style get some criticism, and I will admit there were some times where I just didn't recognize where I was. I've played through Half-Life multiple times, I know the areas, and I've been looking for a specific one that just didn't seem to exist, only to realize that I was already there. I'd say no Half-Life fan project has ever really nailed colors, and this one is no exception either. However, there were plenty of times where the visuals matched perfectly, and it was really cool to see. Of course, that's not a big problem, and the bigger problems are already behind us in this video. This remake really is a great game, and I can't express how much you need to play it. But when you play it, know that you're playing Black Mesa. I see a trend now of people who say they've never played Half-Life, so they're gonna start the series on Black Mesa. And you can do that, but you still never played Half-Life. It just doesn't count. It nails authenticity in some places, but completely drops it in others. Choosing this over the original means you miss out on some big parts of the experience. So if you want to play Half-Life, then just play Half-Life.